You know that feeling when a race goes from tense to personal in the blink of an eye, and before you've even finished saying, "Whoa, what was that?" the whole screen is filled with smoke, bent fenders, and absolute disbelief? That was Martinsville, man, and this Hocevar versus Bubba Wallace situation felt bigger than just one bad corner. It felt raw, emotional, and honestly a little ugly in the way only NASCAR 2026 can deliver when tempers finally boil over. 1 second it's a restart, the next second it's Carson Hocevar getting shoved into chaos, Bubba Wallace staring at a disaster he can't take back, and the entire race taking on a totally different mood. If you're into real NASCAR talk, real driver reactions, and the kind of drama that keeps this sport alive from Circuit of the Americas and COTA all the way to short track madness, hit subscribe right now, because this one deserves a full breakdown. And trust me, what happened next didn't just wreck some cars, it may have changed the whole conversation around both of these drivers heading toward Bristol. Martinsville always has that pressure cooker energy, doesn't it? It's tight, it's mean, it's physical, and patience there lasts about as long as a fresh set of tires on a long run. Late in the race on lap 324, everybody's already on edge, the restart comes, and Bubba Wallace gets into Carson Hocevar heading into turn 3. Not a little nudge. Not a simple bump and run where you shrug and say, "Alright, that's short track racing." No, this was harder than that. Wallace got into the back of the 77 once, then again, and then it looked like he just drove straight through Hocevar. And the second that happened, the whole thing exploded. Cars stacked up, the field had nowhere to go, and a massive pileup wiped out a huge chunk of the Cup Series field in seconds. That's the kind of moment where you almost forget to breathe because you know right away this isn't just a racing incident people are gonna laugh off by Monday morning. When you watched the replay, didn't it feel like the escalation came out of nowhere? Sure, there had already been that earlier moment when they went 3 wide into turn 1, and Bubba clearly didn't love it. Martinsville is not the place where guys just let that stuff go. But even with that in the background, this still felt like a major overreaction. That's why so many fans were left sitting there like, hold on, did Hocevar really do enough to deserve that kind of payback? I don't think so. And I'll be real with you, as someone who watches this stuff way too closely, that's what made it hit even harder. If it's a classic retaliation and everybody understands the setup, that's one thing. But this felt messy, impulsive, and costly in the worst way. Bubba later owned the mistake and admitted he misjudged it and didn't mean to turn him, and that honesty matters. But man, by then the damage was done and the replay was already burned into everybody's brain. And here's the crazy part. Hocevar, after getting absolutely dumped into one of the ugliest moments of the day, still somehow dragged that car home in 15th. 15th. That's the kind of result that almost gets lost because the wreck itself was so wild, but that recovery says a lot. Meanwhile, Bubba's day completely fell apart. Wrecked car, done early, 36th place finish, DNF, and just like that a race that could have been a reset turned into another gut punch. Can you believe how fast momentum can flip in this sport? Just a couple of weeks ago, Bubba Wallace was sitting second in the points. Now after Martinsville, he drops all the way to 11th, and that is not some tiny shuffle you can ignore. That is a massive early season swing, the kind that changes the tone around a team almost overnight. 2 straight finishes of 34th or worse is brutal no matter who you are, but for a driver who came into this stretch with real energy and real expectations, it hits even harder. You could feel the frustration around the whole thing. This was supposed to be one of the tracks where Bubba and that 23 team had something for the field. They had confidence, they had belief, they had speed in practice, and then Sunday came along and none of it mattered when the pressure was on. How many times have we seen that story in NASCAR, where the car looks sharp early in the weekend and then the race turns into a totally different beast? That's what makes this one sting for Bubba fans. It's not just the wreck. It's the pattern. It's the sense that the raw pace is there, but the race keeps slipping away when the real punches start flying. And now the bigger question starts creeping in. Was this just a bad Martinsville moment, or is this the kind of frustration that follows a driver into the next few races? Because once something gets personal on a short track, drivers remember. Oh, they absolutely remember. They might smile, they might say the right things, they might move on publicly, but when they're side by side again and there's only one lane into the corner, memory suddenly becomes very selective. You know what I mean. Hocevar is one of those guys who races with edge anyway, and Bubba's not exactly going to be forgotten after this either. So even though the checkered flag ended the race, it definitely didn't end the tension. And with the Easter break arriving at a perfect time, maybe that cool-down period is the only reason this doesn't immediately spill over into something even bigger before Bristol on April 12th. Then again, Bristol is next, and if there's one place you do not want unresolved tension hanging in the air, it's Bristol. That place turns annoyance into full-blown vendetta in a heartbeat. But while that whole first story was pure frustration, Martinsville somehow gave us the complete opposite emotion too, and that's what made the day feel so unreal. On one side you had chaos, anger, and consequences. On the other, you had Chase Elliott pulling off a win that felt like the perfect reminder of why this sport keeps pulling us back in. Elliott grabbed his first win of the season, the 22nd of his career, and it was not one of those easy, dominant, cruise-control victories. This one was built through patience, timing, and a strategy call that looked risky until it suddenly looked genius. For most of the race, Denny Hamlin was the guy. Pole sitter, out front, controlling everything, leading 292 of the first 317 laps like he had the whole place on lockdown. And if you're Joe Gibbs Racing, you had to feel pretty good about that, especially with Ty Gibbs quietly hanging tough all day and eventually landing a top-5 finish in 4th. But then lap 312 changed the feel of the race completely. Alan Gustafson made the call to pit Elliott earlier than the other main contenders, and that is the kind of move that either gets fans calling you a mastermind or asking what in the world you were thinking. This time, pure gold. When the caution came out, Elliott suddenly had the track position he needed. Ross Chastain briefly grabbed the lead by staying out, and for 1 second it looked like maybe there was another twist coming. But Chase got around him, settled in, and from there he looked like a man who knew the whole race had shifted in his favor. He led the final 69 laps and held off Hamlin by just 0.565 seconds. At Martinsville. That's not a Sunday cruise, that's a pressure test. That's elbows tight on the wheel, heart pounding, don't blink stuff. And behind them you had Joey Logano in 3rd, Ty Gibbs in 4th, William Byron in 5th, which made the front of the field feel loaded with heavy hitters all afternoon. Isn't it wild how one strategy call can completely rewrite a race? One moment Hamlin looks untouchable, the next moment Elliott is the guy standing tall at the end, and suddenly everybody's talking about the crew chief who got second-guessed all over again and still nailed it when it mattered most. That's the beauty of NASCAR 2026 right there. It's not always the fastest car every lap. Sometimes it's the team that sees the race changing half a step before everyone else does. Elliott's win had that deeper emotional layer too, and honestly, that's what pushed it from big to special. This came exactly 11 years after his Cup debut on March 29, 2015, when he finished 38th in a race that was won by Denny Hamlin. Think about that full-circle moment for a second. Same track. Same rival in the story. Totally different ending. That's the kind of sports symmetry that feels almost scripted, except NASCAR is usually too chaotic to write this cleanly. And for Elliott, it wasn't just another trophy to throw on the shelf. It felt like validation. Validation for the team, validation for Gustafson's patience, validation for all the noise that builds whenever a big-name driver goes a little too long without a statement win. Rick Hendrick had apparently told Gustafson that morning to remember it's a marathon, not a sprint, and man, that message landed perfectly because this race turned into exactly that. Not panic, not desperation, just the right move at the right time. Now zoom out for a second, because Martinsville didn't just hand us one headline. It shoved the whole season story forward. Bubba Wallace leaves with a wreck, a point slide, and a situation with Carson Hocevar that people are absolutely going to keep talking about. Chase Elliott leaves with a win that could kick off a serious run. Hamlin leaves knowing he had a race in his hands and let it slip late, even though Joe Gibbs Racing still had strong speed with Ty Gibbs right there in the mix. Tyler Reddick's strong start in a contract year is still hanging in the background too, and that's another thread fans are watching closely. Then on top of all that, the sport is already looking ahead with 2027 Hall of Fame nominee talk around names like Kevin Harvick, Jeff Burton, and Greg Biffle. That's NASCAR for you, man. Legacy, pressure, chaos, opportunity, all swirling together at once. And if you've been following the whole season, from the road course drama chatter around Circuit of the Americas and COTA to the non-stop talk around the Duramax Grand Prix, Christopher Bell, and all the biggest driver reactions every single week, you can feel the intensity building. This season is not easing into anything. It's throwing haymakers. So what does this title really mean now? Hocevar versus Bubba Wallace gets personal. What happened next? What happened next is Bubba paid for it immediately. Hocevar survived better than almost anybody expected, and the rest of the garage took notes. What happened next is Martinsville reminded everybody that one emotional decision can wreck your afternoon and maybe your momentum too. And what happened next is the race didn't stop there, because Elliott turned the second half of the story into a masterclass and stole a huge win from under Hamlin's nose. That contrast is why this race is going to stick with people. One moment made fans angry, the other gave them goosebumps. One driver left needing a reset, another left looking reborn. And now we head to Bristol, where Kyle Larson has been an absolute menace lately, including leading 411 of 500 laps there last April, and you already know the energy is about to go through the roof again. So tell me, do you think Bubba Wallace and Carson Hocevar are really done with this, or is Bristol about to add another chapter? And did Chase Elliott just flip the entire mood of his season in one afternoon? Drop your take in the comments, hit like if you felt the tension from this one through the screen, and subscribe if you want more real NASCAR 2026 breakdowns with actual passion, not recycled noise, because if Martinsville gave us this much drama, the next race might be completely insane.